so much for joining us this late afternoon, early evening. I believe a lot of people will start commuting soon, but I do hope that we get a good turnout. I'm Anvesha Ghosh. I am a research fellow and program lead at the Institute of Social Studies Trust. Just to give you a brief background about ISST, it is a 45-year-old feminist think and do tank that uses evidence as a powerful tool to examine women's engagement with work and labor across sectors. Our research unpacks the gender dimensions of paid and unpaid work, informal economies, labor rights, childcare, collective action, etc. Through collaborative partnership and mixed qualitative quantitative methods, we generate grounded insights to inform policy and advance gender just transformations in India and South Asia. ISST's work is guided by four main themes, one of which is gender and digitalization of labor. The webinar series, This Digital Dilemma, is being organized under this theme and comes on the back of the success of the podcast series of the same name, which we aired this year, and which had episodes on gendered concerns, issues of digitalization, and the digital economy across various sectors such as the platform economy, fisheries, agriculture, skilling, amongst others. The first of a three-part webinar series towards gender justice in India's platform economy, legislation inclusion, and future pathways. It follows some of the recent developments in the labor scenario of this country, the various state legislation for gig workers, the new labor codes, the upcoming ILC on gig workers in 2026 at Geneva are exciting times for those of us working on labor issues and particularly on the platform economy. As ISST, we are extremely interested to see what does these regulations and policies mean for a woman platform worker. What would a gender transformative regulation and policy actually look like? And how will that help more women to join the platform economy if they choose to? We understand that most laws are based on the male breadwinner model, and hence these concerns are important so that marginalized groups have a equal playing field. As an end product, we hope to bring out a brief think piece based on the presentations and discussions today, and hence look forward to the discussion and all of your comments, questions, etc. Quick messages before I hand over to my colleague Shipra, who's going to set the context for today. This webinar is being recorded and would be published publicly. We will ask you all to switch on your camera for a quick photo after the first two presentations are completed. Please put your comments and questions in the chat box. Please feel free to share resources, studies, etc., which you might feel are relevant around this conversation. My colleagues will be collating with me and the respective panelists. They'll be sharing the questions and which the panelists will be responding to at the end of all the presentations. And kindly, please keep your mics on mute for the entirety of the webinar. Thank you for your cooperation and participation. Over to my colleague Shipra now. Thank you.
Thank you, Anvesha. We have a quick presentation that we'd like to share. Our webinar towards gender justice in India's platform economy, legislation, inclusion, and future pathways. And we'll just give a broad background. Global platform economy is said to be, the global market size of it is said to be 556.7 billion in 2024. And the global platform workers are said to be around 150 million as of 2025. And India's gig workforce is also expected to be expanding. And it was estimated that in 2025 it would be around 1 crore, which is projected to go around 2.35 crore by 2029-30, which will be around 6.7% of the non-agriculture workforce by 2029 and 30. That's why it becomes very important to talk about gig and platform workers now. When we talk about gender just imperative, we see, and there are studies which talk about women participation gap and how, despite this rhetoric of platform being flexible, it is still not able to mask the structural barriers which are present. It is it is compounded there. We see compounded precarity, where we see there are studies which talk about wage discriminations, safety risk for women, harassment, algorithmic bias, and also the unpaid care word burden following on women, which also leads to them not being able to compete with their male counterparts. We see platform economy as of now is expanding, but still we see women's concentration in at least India's platform economy in generally domestic work, beauty work, then home-based digital tasks and care and elderly services, which were also already a feminized sector. Um, as of now, in last 1 year, we have seen many changes in the national front, with Code of Social Security coming, where in 2020, which recognized gig workers, platform workers. It was there was for the first time there was a conversation about life and disability cover, accidental insurance, health and maternity benefit, old age protection, crutches, education, and a board that was set to be set, and it came forth recently in November 2021, 2025. Other than that, different states have come up with gig and worker welfare acts, which started with Rajasthan in July 2023, and recently Karnataka, Bihar, Jharkhand have all came out with their own respective gig and platform workers act, where they talk about registration frameworks, then algorithmic transparency, work termination, grievance redressal mechanism, among others. Then there is also the pressure, this coming up of eShram portal, this one-stop solution which is proposed, where 14, as of now, 14 central schemes have been integrated to provide access to the gig and platform workers. And as of November 2025, 5.09 lakh gig and work platform workers have registered in the eShram portal. And it provides it is set to provide various benefits, like we have Suraksha Bima Yojana, then Ayushman Bharat, then PM Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana. As part of all these schemes are part of the eShram portal. Then even recently in Union Budget 25-26, even the online platform workers were set to be brought under the purview of eShram portal, where they are said that they'll be provided with identity card and also provided with healthcare under the Ayushman Bharat. Still, when we talk about gender provisions like maternity benefit, crèche facilities, still the position of women and how it will be done is still not that very clear. So we were very interested. So we decided to go back and see what exactly is happening in Parliament and what kind of questions are coming, uh, you know, in respect to the gig and platform workers. And we saw various questions, but generally the questions were about data measurement, about gender segregated, state segregated data, how many gig workers are registered. We found various questions around that. Then there were questions around social security and welfare schemes related to gig workers. Then we also saw questions which were about working condition, wages, and labor protections. There were questions on implementation mechanisms, funds. We also saw youth and women specific questions. Um, for example, what is participation of youth? These were the question asked. Not all of the questions were answered in the parliament, but these were the kind of questions that were coming from the parliamentarians. And also about the gender segregated data, there were questions like that. And we have seen different MPs also bringing this up. In fact, very recently, we saw how one of the MP talked about precariat work condition of gig workers, talking about how there's low job security, no dignity. And so we see these discussions coming even more in recent past, which is actually a good thing. Like the topic is being discussed, and we see that a lot. Thank you. Now, Anvesha will go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So basically, what the context basically shows that there have been a lot of developments in this particular, in the platform economy from a regulation point of view. We've been collating a lot of parliamentary questions, etc. That have been very interesting to see. So, but for we, as we mentioned, that for ISST, our concerns are around what does all of this mean for women workers per se. So some of the sticky concerns, which we are hoping that through this webinar and through the think piece that we will be trying to sort of find answers and solutions to, some of these points include the POSH, whether does it include or does it not include. There's a continuous conundrum. There was a recent case in Karnataka wherein a client, for the purpose of that particular case, the perpetrator, who was a driver with one of the platforms, was considered as an employee, and hence could be punished and could be put under the POSH Act. So, things like this. So what happens, because it's a new category of workers, so what does that mean? Then in the Code of Social Security, while, for example, domestic workers are defined, but many of the traditional domestic workers also do a lot of gig work, but it technically does not include domestic workers. So what does this overlaying of, roles, and what does that mean for a women domestic worker? And given that care is a very feminized sector, both traditionally and in the online platforms that are coming up. Again, the wage code. You are not an employee; you are an independent partner. So, what does that mean? Uh, what kind of grievance mechanism do we have in place, given that mostly atomized workers, and for women, they're, I think, doubly atomized, because you do not really find women in hub centers and would be working at an individual level. So there's information asymmetry. Um, for example, we see a lot of platforms, much smaller ones, not, the more popular ones, closing down. And suddenly women don't know where to go. The money is stuck, the incentives are stuck, their ratings are stuck, their data is completely gone. So what does that mean? How do you bring that to these kind of conversations? Then, of course, the gender wage gap, as I said, often the algorithm is not really neutral per se, and would not really consider women's, time spent on unpaid care burden, as we all know. And the recent time use study also showed that women are overwhelmingly giving much higher number of hours to paid and to unpaid care work. Stigma and bias. There's a lot of qualitative study. We do not have big quant study, but there are many qualitative studies talking about how bias exists. And this can be very harmful. It impacts the working conditions, impacts the ability to earn from platforms because of your, the identity that you have. And generally, there's no regulation or policy that talks about bias or stigma vis-a-vis this particular category of workers. Then the ILO's Convention on Gig Workers coming up in 2026. If we look at it globally, what are some of India's roles in pushing for labor standards, and what are the gender concerns around there? Maternity leave, again, is part of most of our the new state legislations. But if we look at the labor codes, they're talking about very typically in a traditional brick and mortar sort of setting. How does this get operationalized? I think these are some of the challenges that one thinks of. Again, the idea of creches, I think very, very useful, very, very important. But as we have seen in the example of the building and other construction workers board, these have not been fully operational. There have been various problems with the operationalizing of especially creches, and what does that mean? Because how do you talk of, say, multi-apping in this case? Because there have to be a number of women workers uh, active on the platform for 90 days, to avail maternity leave, to think of creches, uh, And finally, I think warehousing logistics, it's becoming extremely rapidly feminizing. A lot of women prefer to work in dark stores rather than be on the road. And it sort of blurs the line between being an employee and being a gig worker. So this is also an upcoming sort of a place where we see a lot of women coming in. So going forward, what would this space look like? So I think these are some of the concerns that we will be discussing today, and we hope to have some, solutions or regulatory pathways issues that we can talk about uh, through this discussion and in our think piece as well. Uh, Not taking much of your time, I am going to now introduce our speakers sequentially. To begin with, we have Dr. Manjunath Gangadhar. He's presently serving as the Additional Labor Commissioner, Industrial Relations, Government of Karnataka, as in charge of the settlement of industrial disputes. His work includes drafting labor policy and new legislations, including the recently drafted Karnataka platform-based gig worker social security and welfare act 2024, the Karnataka rules under the labor codes, etc. He has been involved in the regulation of labor laws and social security, and is a researcher in the field of labor laws and industrial relations. He holds a PhD from the National Law School of India University, a master's degree in women's studies, and MA in economics, and has been very, very supportive of worker representatives and the CSOs. And we are thankful, sir, for joining us this evening. Then we have Dr. Elena Gerasimova. She is a labor law and labor standards specialist with the ILO, the Decent Work Technical Support Team for South Asia, now based in New Delhi. After joining ILO in 2018, she served as an ILS specialist with the ILO Office for Pacific Island countries. She holds a master's degree and PhD in law from Moscow State University. And before joining ILO, she was an associate professor and head of the labor law department at the National Research University, Higher School of Economics, and co-founder and director of the Center for Social and Labor Rights in Moscow. Thank you, Dr. Elena, for joining us. We have Madhumita from the Center for Future Mobility at OMI Foundation. She's the lead there, and she holds a MA in Development Studies and a BA in Sociology. She applies a multidisciplinary approach to urban mobility, advocating for inclusive policy. At OMI Foundation, she leads initiatives promoting sustainable, accessible, and adaptable transport solution. She spearheads the Powering Popular Mobility campaign, advocating for recognition of popular transport services and their vital contribution to urban economies. Through her research and advocacy, Madhumita is committed to advancing transport systems that are efficient, equitable, and future-ready. Thank you, Madhumita, for joining us. Then we have Alok Prasanna Kumar. Alok is actually traveling and may or may not be able to join us, or might join us briefly because his flight has been delayed. So he has sent his apologies, but he may still be able to make it. So I'm going to introduce him as well. Alok Prasanna Kumar is co-founder of Vidhi. His area of research include judicial reforms, constitutional law, urban development, and law and technology. He graduated with a BA LLB honors from the Nalsar University in 2008 and obtained the BCL from the University of Oxford in 2009. He writes a monthly column for the EPW, apart from media outlets such as Deccan Herald, The Hindu, Indian Express, Scroll, Quint. He has practiced in Supreme Court and Delhi High Court from the chambers of Mr. Mohan Parasaran. And lastly, we also have Dr. Tanya MB. She is a fellow at the V.V. Giri National Labor Institute, where she coordinates the Center for Labor Market Studies and the Integrated Labor History Research Program. With over 2 decades of experience in labor research, she focuses on employment, gender, social security, and labor institution. She leads interdisciplinary projects, training, and policy-oriented research, engaging policymakers, academicians, and trade unions to promote inclusive labor markets, empower workers, and address structural inequalities. Welcome, Tanya. And I would now welcome Dr. Manjunath Gangadhar to kindly present his presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anvisha. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share my views on gender justice in India's platform economy, and also with the latest developments in the labor law ecosystems in the country. Not necessarily on courts, but also on the gig and other platform workers act, which many states, including Karnataka, has enacted. What I'll do is, Anvisha, gender justice is a very, very broad terminology which has several dimensions. It could be the constitutional rights, the legal rights, the social justice, cultural rights. It could be economic participation of women, women empowerment, violence against women, and sexual harassment issues. So, how is platforms treating women employees? Is the question which we are really trying to address today. And bringing my own experience of enforcement of labor laws and also policy making, I think I stick to a couple of issues. I would like to concentrate more on the POSH Act 2013 and the four labor codes and our own Karnataka State Gig Workers Act, and how does these legislations talk about ensuring gender justice and protecting women's rights and labor rights within their framework. So that's what I would like to be doing with you, doing in this session. The first is the POSH Act of 2013. You rightly raised an upcoming case with the Karnataka High Court on a cab driver, and how the High Court of Karnataka brought in the meaning that the cab driver shall also be treated as an employee, and POSH Act would be applicable to the platforms. And now that it is before the divisional bench, since a stay was given, and the employer has gone on a writ appeal. So, we will wait for the decision of the Honorable High Court of Karnataka in this issue. But if we look at the POSH Act itself, um, it says that there are certain duties cast upon the employers to ensure women's safety and dignity at work. So that's really very, very important. And if we look into the definition of workplaces would also cover platforms and platform economy, because it includes a dwelling place or a house which would be covered under the definition under the POSH Act. Most important also would be the employee definition. If we could relook into the definition under the POSH Act, employee includes those who are working on a voluntary basis. That is what the platforms were telling us, that it is voluntary. They join in and they go out. So that's what the meaning is for the employee working on a voluntary basis or otherwise, and whether the terms of employment or express or implied. And as we know that there is usually a contract which is enforced by the platforms whenever the gig workers would like to do any gig activity. And employer definition is very important, because it says any person responsible for the management and supervision and control of the workplace. It could be algorithm or it could be human control. So basically, platforms are all exercising supervision and control on the gig workers. So definitely, squarely, they fall within the definition of an employer. And also in the explanation part of the definition, there is an explanation to the management. What is management? Management means a person or a board or a committee responsible for formulation and administration of policies for such organization. So contractual obligation is a policy of an organization. So a person responsible to formulate and admin such policies is definitely a management. So there is no escape route from the POSH Act applicability. They are all management and they are all responsible for the contractual obligations. Very recently, not as recently, 2018, a Ministry of Corporate Affairs issued one amendment to the Companies Act. It is called Companies Accounts Rules 2014. All these companies are registered under the Companies Act. And the inserted clause in 2018 says that a statement that the company has complied with the provisions relating to the constitution of ICC under POSH Act 2013. So that also requires the companies, the platforms to make such a statement regarding the constitution of ICC. And further, Anvisha, if you could see section 15, the determination of compensation under the POSH Act, it says whenever the IC committee would consider the compensation, it shall consider the mental trauma, the pain, the suffering, and emotional distress, loss in the career opportunity, the medical expenses that the women undertakes. So all these are all very important in terms of understanding that women do suffer mental trauma, and it becomes the duty of the employer to extend support to women by constituting IC or whatever measures that he has to take. And most important, under the POSH Act, I end the POSH Act conversation here. Duties of the employer, section 19G. I would like to draw your all attention, which says the duties of the employer is to provide assistance to the women if he so chosen to file a complaint in relation to the offense under IPC or any other law for the time being in force. So he shall provide assistance to the women. It's not necessarily women employee, it's women. And also it says the H clause, cause to initiate action against the perpetrator. So if we could, since laws has to be read, the social construct of the laws is only to protect the interests of the weaker section. So the readings should be that we have to give a legible understanding of the law, and the law does apply to the platforms. And one of the most important issues of sexual harassment at workplace shall be the duty of the platforms to take care of their women employees. So this is about POSH and things like that. And I would like to talk a bit about IR code. And Visha, it is very interesting because we don't read a lot about the law. If we could read IR code or all the four codes put together, there is an important definition of employee. Always when we talk about platforms, the only worrying thing is understanding the concept as beyond the employer-employee relationship. So that is not so. The law also provides under the employee definition, after two, three categories, it also says the appropriate government has powers to include a person to be declared as an employee. So we should not really worry about, because every appropriate government should simply say all gig and platform workers are also called as employee. So this common definition is across all four labor codes. So it is left to the jurisdiction of the appropriate governments to include the employee, since the definition includes that it has to be declared by the government. So again, the employer definition is also covered. Industry is a very, very simple understanding. It is any systematic activity carried on. So platforms carry a systematic activity by using certain technology with the cooperation between the employer and the worker. So the definition of industry can also be understood. And IR code also talks about standing orders, about 300 workers. They're all now to be covered under the Standing Orders Act, according to me. All platforms shall be now having a standing orders in place, and they should have either adopt the model standing orders, or they should certify their standing orders with the department. And another important aspect is the unfair labor practices, which is there under the IR code. I would like you to, I like everyone's attention to this. The second schedule to the IR code talks about unfair labor practices and on the part of the employers. If platforms are to be treated as employers, what it says is, I'm reading column 5 from schedule 2 of unfair labor practices, to discharge or dismiss workers by way of victimization. We have seen how algorithms sometimes do damage, and then there is a victimization of the not only women, also men workers, by way of blocking of their ID and other victimization process. So, whatever discharge or dismissal of workers which is not done in good faith but in the colorable exercise of employers' rights is also an unfair labor practice. And to show favoritism or partiality to one set of workers regardless of merit. Again, it talks about discrimination with respect to workers. So again, the it becomes an unfair labor practices to indulge in acts or force or violence. Again, we have seen in many platforms where there is acts of force, so that they resign from their jobs and things like that. So my argument is that IR code exclusively covers platforms, and it is high time that we ensure that the platforms would fall under the jurisdiction of the IR code. So code on wages, again, I told the employee definition also includes a person to be declared as an employee by the appropriate government. And the employer is none other than the person or an authority who has ultimate control over the affairs of the establishment. Establishment definition is also provided, and code on wages prohibits discrimination on the ground of gender, which is a welcome note, and it's nothing but the provisions which we had under the earlier act, which has now been repealed. So the code on social security, you mentioned it earlier. Of course, there is a we have a definition now for the gig and platforms. It is not that it doesn't cover the other. It doesn't cover gig and platform workers for the other provisions for social security. According to me, if you could ask me, there could be the coverage of all gigs and platforms in other provisions which are there under the code on social security, because there is a definition of an occupier. Earlier, our understanding of occupier was only with respect to factories. Now, the definition of occupier includes person who is in charge of firms or companies, etc. So this is a deviation where we need to understand about the provisions relating to social security. Of course, we have maternity benefit act and things and other provisions. So basically, my argument is that the labor codes has to be understood in a broader perspective. It is left to the appropriate governments to broaden the definition of an employee, wherein all the digital workers would also be covered. Coming back to our own code, the Karnataka Platform Based Gig Workers Act 2025 and Rules 2025, which is now in force, we have defined a gig worker, which is something different from what the Social Security Code defines. We don't confine them that they are outside the traditional employer-employee relationship. That is not our definition, and our definition is very different, and we bring in such relationship or a cooperation between the worker and the platforms. So as you rightly told and mentioned earlier, termination issues we have addressed. So there can't be any terminations without providing 14 days of notice, and the blocking and suspending of work can't happen. And the rights to grievance redressal is on two-tier mechanisms which we have provided. The platforms shall establish an internal dispute resolution committee to take up all these issues. And our Rule 12 mentions specifically about the POSH Act, wherein all the labor codes doesn't mention. So we have mentioned that they are covered under the POSH Act under our Rule 12. So we also have anti-discrimination policies and obligation of the platforms to enter into fair contracts, and the workers' rights to refuse the tasks that are assigned is also provided. So basically, the Karnataka legislation ensures that women in the platforms, it would really the object of the act is to ensure that more and more women joins the labor force, and also perhaps gig works, and see that their working conditions and rights are protected within the legislative framework which we have done. So this is what I wanted to convey. Well, I would be very happy to listen to my other co-panelists to have a better understanding of gender justice in the platform economy. So thank you very much, Anvesha, for this opportunity. I look forward for the discussions further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I think you very rightly said that how broad, looking at the broad definition will sort of also help us to organize ourselves and ask, platform workers to be recognized as employer and employees, and then the benefits that come with that. Not taking much time, may I please request Dr. Elena Gerasimova to kindly start her presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much for inviting to speak. So my presentation will be about mainly what ILO is doing in terms of development of standards to protect and cover workers who work through digital labor platforms. So I'm sharing my presentation now. 1 second. Okay, can you see the presentation? Can you see the screen?
Can.
Okay, great. So just a few words about ILO in case not everyone is familiar. ILO is a very old international organization established in 1919 to deal with all issues related to working relationship and working conditions. It is a tripartite agency represented by workers, employers, and governments. It has 187 members. India is a member since 1919, and we are speaking particularly today about the standards because ILO is a normative organization. So one of the goals of the ILO is to develop international labor standards, and they're usually adopted in a form of conventions, but also we have recommendations and protocols. But of course, the most known instrument is conventions. So India, being a member of the ILO, ratified many international labor standards. Thank you. I think it would be great if mics are kept muted. So as of now, India ratified 47 standards and 47 conventions and 1 protocol. Some of these conventions are not actually anymore in force. Some of them were abrogated. And generally, if you look at the situation with ratifications in India, we should recognize that India is not a very active country to ratify standards lately, and India didn't ratify latest or let's say modern instruments a lot. So many of the instruments ratified are quite old. And don't respond to the current challenges so much. So we have just a few words about existing ratifications. So we have so-called fundamental principles and rights at work, and there are 11 instruments, 10 conventions, and 1 protocol under this group. And these standards are very important for all groups of workers, particularly for gig workers, because the ILO concept is that these principles and rights should be applicable to everyone who works, not only to employees, not only to people who have certain type of contract, but to everyone who works. And among these fundamental conventions, there are these 5 principles are freedom of association, elimination of forced labor, child labor, discrimination, and safe and healthy working environment. So from these 5 principles and related conventions, India ratified 6 conventions related to forced labor, child labor, and non-discrimination. So you can say that all workers, including in digital economy, should be in India protected by these 6 conventions. At the same time, India didn't ratify conventions related to freedom of association, safety and health, and protocol to Convention 29 on forced labor. So these instruments, they still should be respected, promoted, and realized in all countries, in all member states, but it is more complicated, of course, to request for that in case the country didn't ratify it, and it is really the case of India. So as soon as we are speaking about the situation of women, and I would just remind that there are some other international labor standards related to gender aspects and which can be important, let's say, for women. So in addition to the two conventions which I already mentioned, fundamental conventions 100 and 111 on non-discrimination and equal remuneration, there are other important conventions so related to equality. For example, conventions 190 on violence and harassment. It is very famous convention adopted in 2019. Part-time work convention 175. Then there are also very important for women conventions related to family and maternity responsibilities. Maternity Protection Convention 183 and Workers with Family Responsibilities 156. And there are several conventions which deal with specific categories of workers, but there are lots of women among these categories of workers, and that's why they're particularly important for women. So these are conventions on nursing personnel 149, Home Work Convention 177, and Domestic Workers Convention 189. But from all these, only two conventions, which are highlighted in green, 100 and 111 fundamental conventions, ratified by India. Others are not ratified. So they can be used as a guidance for development legislation, but we cannot say that India is bounded by the provisions of these conventions. So what is happening now, and this will be the main part of my presentation, there was a discussion at the ILO since several years whether there is a need to look at this new group of workers, those who work through the digital labor platforms, and whether there is a need for development of a new international labor standards, which would be applicable to workers at digital platforms. And ILO conducted a number of studies and surveys looking at what are the working conditions of this group of workers, and also analyzing whether there are gaps in implementation of existing standards and applicability of existing standards to these groups of workers. And well, it was seen that significant number of workers work quite long working hours, and for many of them, their incomes received through their digital platforms is the primary source of income. And so de facto for many of them, really work through digital platform is not something in addition to their main work, but like the main work itself. So there was more and more consensus in the last several years that there is a need to focus on this group of workers specifically, and there is a need to develop an instrument, international labor standard on this group of workers. So there generally, also there were many discussions on what types of work and what groups of workers should be covered by this instrument, because there are several types of platforms and workers which can work. So there are labor platforms which provide access to some work implemented online. So for example, professional services, work in creativity and multimedia, sales and marketing support, clerical and data entry tasks, and micro tasks. So you see the examples of specific operations on the slide. And then digital platforms also help workers to create work implemented physically and personally, not online, but like location-based works. So this includes services related to delivery, passenger transport, home services, care services, and domestic work. So we see that the categories of workers and types of work which can be implemented through digital platform is quite diverse. So there were a lot of discussions and debates on which groups should be covered. And I will come back to this, but just for now, I want to say that the decision on the development of international labor standard was taken, and on the adoption of the standard, there is a decision on that. And actually, the approach which International Labor Organization has chosen is that the instrument should be very broad and cover all these different types of work and platforms and workers who walk through these platforms. So now, this is a slide which represents the process of development of the International Labor Standard. As I mentioned already, the work started several years ago. Here's the slide shows 2024 as the first stage of the work on the development of the standard. But generally, there were several studies and research even before 2024. In 2024, International Labour Office prepared the first report on law and practice, looking at the regulation in ILO existing standards and regulation in national legislation of work of platform workers. Then in February 2025, this year, there was a yellow report published which analyzed responses to the questions which were asked last year from the governments on what should be their ILO approach to regulation, whether we need to have a standard, whether it should be a convention or recommendation or convention plus recommendation, and what should be the content of these instruments. So in June this year, during the International Labour Conference in Geneva, there was a first discussion on the content of the instrument, and the conclusions were adopted. So there was a decision taken that the convention and recommendation will be developed, and some provisions of these instruments were discussed. So based on this discussion, in August, there was a Brown report published, which also included questions again to the constituents of the ILO, governments and employers and workers organizations. They had to respond this questionnaire by mid-November, and the questions were related to the very specific content of the standard. So now the office is working with these responses, and by March next year, there will be a next report called Blue Report with the revised draft text of the instrument, based on the responses received now from the ILO constituents from all member states. And we just see that the interest to the content of this instrument is very, very high. So the number of responses which the office receives from different countries, from governments and workers and employers, is higher than normally when different instruments are being discussed. And the final stage will be in June 2026, during the next International Labour Conference, which will have to adopt their specific instrument. So, as I already mentioned, there was an agreement taken in June this year that the convention and recommendation should be developed both. So the convention will be a instrument which will become binding for countries after ratification. A recommendation will provide more detailed guidance on how the convention can be implemented. But there were not much discussions and decisions on the specific provisions, because actually the debate on the content of this convention was very complicated. It is a very sensitive topic, and the positions of workers and employers representatives of several different countries are quite controversial. So as a result of more than 1 week discussion, there decisions were not achieved on many topics, just on several. But anyway, as of now, if you look at the content, at the draft of the convention, you will see that the following issues planned to be covered. So these issues include fundamental principles and rights at work, OSH. It is a fundamental principle itself, but still there are additional provisions related to OSH. Protection against violence and harassment, employment promotion, employment relationship. And here the idea is that not all relationship of workers in digital platforms should be recognized as employment relationship, but there should be due consideration given to the type of work, and when relevant, when their relationship meets the criteria of employment relationship, digital workers should be recognized as employees. The other topics which should be covered are remuneration and working time, social security, impact of the use of automated systems, protection of digital platform workers' personal data, suspension and deactivation of accounts and termination of employment or engagement, terms and conditions of employment or engagement, protection of migrant workers and refugees, dispute resolution, compliance and enforcement, non-less favorable treatment, and provisions related to implementation. So,
Dr. Irina, you have 2 minutes if you could kindly wrap
sure,
up.
sure.
Thank you.
So the agreement right now, as I said, it is very controversial topic, but the agreement is reached that the convention should be principles based, so we will not have too many very specific provisions. Agreement is that their adequate protection should be ensured in the convention for all digital workers, and that it is important to include enough flexibility clauses to accommodate diversity of business models, work arrangements, and status in employment of workers. Yeah, so as I already mentioned, the key discussion will happen in June next year. So for those, probably I'll have no time to stop on this, but you will have the presentation so you can see how the digital labor platforms and digital platform workers are defined right now. As I already mentioned, this, both definitions are very broad. So all these categories of workers and work that I listed earlier, they are all covered by these definitions. And in terms of gender perspective, I would just highlight that there are several provisions especially relevant to women. So particularly the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation, one of the fundamental principles is mentioned as one which should be followed in respect of this category of workers, as well as all other categories of workers. And there are also specific provisions on violence and harassment and on employment promotion for disadvantaged groups and groups in vulnerable situations. Yeah, so we will know more after June next year, but fingers crossed, I hope, and we all hope that the decision will be taken on the adoption of both convention and recommendation. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you. Thank you so much for walking us through this entire landscape of the ILC, and we really hoping in 2026 June we will have the adoption and then continuing so the ratification, etc. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next speaker, can we ask everyone to switch on their videos if you don't mind? We'll do a quick picture. My colleague Saras will be telling us once we have taken the picture. Yeah.
Okay, we are done. Thank you,
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Thanks, Shipra. So I would like to now invite Madhumita. Please
Yes.
go ahead. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks, ISST, for inviting me to be part of this panel. Really excited to start my presentation. So if I can just have my PPT presented. So today I'll be speaking about social protection in India's platform economy with special focus on what this means for women, drawing on learnings from our own flagship study, one on the social protection for platform workers, where we looked at the supply dynamics, and also one where we looked at women in platform economy and did a basic survey on what their learnings are, how are they interacting with the platform economy. So I'll just proceed with that. And my aim is to basically address the larger question of how platform work is scaling rapidly in India, and how do we ensure that social protection systems evolve in a way that is inclusive, portable, and also gender responsive. Just a quick another introduction on just our institute. So it's OMI Foundation. We are a policy research think tank working on mobility related issues and challenges and opportunities. And we are placed in 4 centers: Center for Future Mobility, and I am the lead of that center. And we have Center for Clean Mobility, where we look at electrification, future fuel, and innovations around that space. Then we have the Center for Inclusive Mobility, where we look at gender, age, disability, intersections. And then we have the Center for Technological Transition, where we look at mobilities applications and usage of AI and tech in mobility and beyond. Can I have the next slide? Yes, so I want to begin with drawing all your attention to the scale of change that we're witnessing. So between 2011 to 12 and 2019-20, we see that the share of gig and platform workers in Indian workforce has increased from 0.454% to 1.33%, which might look modest, but it actually is a 2.5-fold increase in less than a decade. And if you look at the number of platforms worldwide, it has increased from 142 in 2010 to 777 in 2020, which is also a 5-fold increase. And when we look at the estimates of platform workers, while we did have your team share the updated numbers, 77 lakh was the count in 2021, and they are projected to be 2.35 crore in 2030. And in one of the study, we also discovered that women constitute less than 2% of the platform workforce here. But just understanding this landscape, we need to understand why why is this space growing? So when we look at it, from our research, what we understand is that it's a low entry barrier business where especially youth and migrant workers who do not have access to local networks or lack financial collateral to support their employment, they are able to come into this space and benefit from it. And it also provides them with this valuable benefit of flexibility in work hours, and they can decide what tasks they want to apply and use their time in a way that they wish to use it on. Then there is also this case where when we spoke with the workers, they pointed out that in a platform-based business, they are receiving timely compensation for their services, and their incomes are also comparatively higher when compared to workers in unorganized sector. So they prefer working in this space, and that's why it's also booming, is what we see. And especially when we think about women, what is drawing them to this work is that from our research in the Women in Platform Economy paper, we understood that they are one of the things that they say is that they want to satisfy the desire of becoming an entrepreneur, and a gig work or a platform based work is helping them achieve that. And some women also say that they have learned multiple skills and they want to monetize and find money by doing that. And some even pointed out that they try to earn to pay for their higher education or support their dependents and so on. So what we can understand is that this space is enabling multiple opportunities for a lot of people, and it becomes much more pertinent for this evolving and growing network of platform work and workers to be suitably also supported for their well-being. Next slide, please. So just drawing on to taking a particular focus on our study and the learnings from it. Our social protection report had 2 aims. One is to understand what are the supply side information on social security benefits extended by platform workers, so platform businesses. So what are the social security benefits given to workers by platform businesses? And we were also trying to understand and map what are the global practices in social security disbursement. So those are the two things that we try to understand. Next slide. So we engaged with 10 digital platforms, and there are two types of engagements for worker and platforms. One is either they sign a contract and directly engage with the platform, or through a workforce provider. So that would be either through a fleet operator or through a agency which helps them interact with the platform and then start their work. And then we also spoke with government institutions which provide social protection and social protection schemes, and also are involved in awareness building. So we engaged with all of these stakeholders and built the findings and recommendations later on. And the global case best practices analysis was done through secondary research. Next slide. So while we were trying to map what are the sort of benefits provided by platform businesses, we engaged with four types of platform businesses, which is location-based, as was also pointed out by our ILO colleague here. One is the passenger mobility segment, then the hyperlocal delivery segment, home services, and e-commerce businesses. From this, what we understood is that this is short overview is accident cover, health and medical support, and education support for children were often provided by most of the businesses. And if you see this, you also notice that old age protection is conspicuously missing or not being provided by any of these business models. Next, please. Then when you see upskilling opportunities are also provided by are largely provided by all businesses, but access to credit and maternity cover specifically, and affirmative action for women's workforce participation are also not really considered by a lot of these businesses. Next slide, we'll delve deeper into it later on. Yes. So as I said, the common benefits across sectors was accidental insurance coverage, where often disability and death would be included, and then health and medical support included telemedicine consultation, free consultations, and then also support for OPD care. And in the cases of specific diseases, they were also covering for hospitalization, and some sort of cash benefits were also extended to them in case of an accident or if they were going through a particular disease. And similarly, they would also help them enroll with multiple government schemes, especially Ayushman Bharat. And some of these apps were also providing upskilling programs for workers where they could avail and take that forward. And there was also a case where one-time school education benefits for 25,000 rupees or more were provided for the gig workers' children as well. Then there are also emergency support funds in case of a family emergency, and there were also different benefits like protection of personal baggage, mobile phones, which are used for their work. Then when you see, especially to encourage women's participation, hyperlocal delivery segment were the ones who were largely involved in providing benefits for women specifically. So that involved paid menstrual leave, and they had joining bonuses, which also to encourage their participation. We also had against sexual harassment. Some of the platforms also highlighted that they ensure that CCTV coverages are placed at different merchant stores so that women feel more safer, the delivery executives. And some were also offering vehicles because if they don't have access to asset, they are supported to do that. And they're also provided with clean restrooms as they partner with petrol stations and then enabled their delivery service partners to access them. And some were also given safety kits with torches and pepper sprays, and some were also could also avail self-defense trainings through the platform, which was facilitated to them. In the case of credit, these platforms would partner with fintech and formal lenders and facilitate lending, and cash flow based lending was also an innovative finance method, which was an option that driver partners or the gig workers could avail. Next slide, please. In case of the old age pension, as we saw previously, it was mostly not covered by large sections of the gig platform businesses. And specifically, it was harder for them to navigate because of the transient nature of platform work. They're not always present on the app, and they do not stay on for a longer period as well. So it's difficult for them to figure that out. And there was also difficulty in collecting substantial corpus for old age protection through consistent long-term contributions by the workers themselves, because they were also hesitant to contribute to the fund. So innovative approaches are needed to solve for that, is what even came out from the surveys that we administered. In case of financing health covers, the biggest challenge that was told was that there is a high healthcare insurance costs are much higher than the inflation, and because of which accessing them is becoming more difficult. And therefore, there needs to be an innovative approach that also needs to be thought out for resolving this. Other than that, there are also awareness and access related issues, which was highlighted for providing social security benefits. Next slide, please. Now I wanted to just highlight on how different countries globally are approaching social protection for platform workers. So countries like UK and the US, where there are very less gig workers, they have classified platform work as formal employment. And an example is the case of California approving the Assembly Bill 5. And what happened there was the truck drivers were asked to formally register themselves as formal employees, and that actually did not favor them well, because most of the workers decided to move out of California and work where there is easy, where they still benefit from all the services that they could avail as a gig worker. And some also were not happy with losing his autonomy, and the alternative was to create their own company, which involved high costs and paperwork, which a lot of truck drivers were not in favor of. So there was a lot of people moving from that profession in general. And then there is the example of Uruguay, where monotax was one of their scheme, which where their informal workers benefits were extended to platform work. Here what happened is that this still preserves flexibility, and it's also easy to scale since there's already a structure in place that can be, and it's also easier to implement. But the limitation here was that it lowers the benefit levels that can be provided. So as an employer bill, all the coverages for an employer would be extended to the gig worker, but in this case there'll be less benefits, and government of the employer would be also limited. And then comes the case where the India's code on social security, which is supported by Ishram portal, is what is being envisioned, where its approach is dismantling the formal and informal dichotomy, and we look at gig workers as a separate, distinct category. And this basically enables portable, status neutral protection, where the portal allows, let's say, migrant workers who is working in a state A and is receiving benefits, and if he's traveling to a different state, his benefits does not get stopped, or he's still able to receive his benefits. So that is enabled, and it also has universal to near universal coverage possibility. So that's the three different approaches around the globe. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. You can skip the slide. So the recommendations that I want to highlight from our basic survey and analysis is that so we need to enhance social protection awareness, because the contribution that needs to be done by the workers are actually they were actually posing their challenges with the contributing towards social protection, since they prefer higher immediate pay, and that would, although compromise their resilience against future economic shocks, I think awareness around those lines need to be enhanced, so they are willing to contribute and participate in social security schemes. And there are also challenges around how enrollment processes are cumbersome, and therefore they would require support in that front as well. And we require innovative approaches to social protections, in the sense that since their earning margins are very low, I think fixed monthly contributions to smaller, more frequent installments, like let's say daily or weekly, must be considered, where tech-enabled micro savings, micro insurance, micro pension schemes are all envisioned and are being thought of for the platform for workforce specifically. And in the case of for government specifically, so Jamaica has a national social protection committee, and Kenya has national social protection secretariat, where they have a coordinating authority to ensure that central level rules and state level rules are all coordinated and are devolved uniformly, so there is easier compliance possibility. So something similar can be envisioned for India as well. And harnessing the existing social protection infrastructure is also another key aspect to be considered. We have ESIC hospitals which are already in place, so that can be extended for gig workers also to benefit from. And benefits should be portable across all states, which is already a possibility with the issue.
Madhumita, can I request you to wrap it up now? Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I think next slide. And the last thing that I want to highlight is the framework that we'd come up with from our research, which is the RISE framework, which basically says what are the key principles to keep in mind while drafting, or that states are coming up with for code on social security implementation and benefits of disbursement. So it should recognize diversity in women's participation. So it should consider their interaction with the platforms, how it is not full-time and can be linear, and it might not be linear, and intermittent participation needs to be considered. Then A stands for augmenting financing through gender responsive mechanisms. So so we need to look at how different methodologies, different financing mechanisms can be involved, considering their capabilities for contributing to the social security funds. I stands for institutionalizing evidence-based gender-informed design, where of course gender disaggregated data matters, and figured for anonymization and sharing of data to enable that as well. And S stands for supporting enrollment and awareness to put rights into access. And E stands for ensuring accessibility and portability. So that would be all.
Great. Thank you, Madhumita, for highlighting some of the national as well as global examples of social protection through the platforms as well as the governance, and giving us the RACE framework. Can I now request Alok to please present? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anvesha. And my apologies, everyone had expected to be back in Bangalore and in a stable place to do this talk. But unfortunately, there were flight delays, and therefore there might be some background noise because I'm almost reaching home. So I'll not waste any time, and I want to leave you with three major thoughts. Please forgive me, some of these have already been covered by Mr. Manjunath, Dr. Manjunath in his presentation. I missed some of the initial part of it. But what I'd like to really talk about is how we at Vidhi have approached the question of protections for gig workers, and specifically women in the gig work space. To start off on a point which I think Madhumita has referred to, which is the Code on Social Security. We believe the Code on Social Security being implemented in 2025 is already outdated, that it no longer addresses the concerns of gig workers. It was drafted at a time when gig work was still evolving. It has not taken into account the lot of changes that have taken place post 2020, and it is probably too little too late. And the one main thought that I sort of wanted to leave you with is the idea that the social code on social security adopts what I like to call the charity model when it comes to gig work. that it believes that social security and things like that are charity, which the government, in its infinite benevolence and generosity, will extend to gig workers at some point of time in the future, money permitting, and etc. 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 This again might have been necessary given that when the when social security code was being drafted in 2016, 17, 18, 19, it was still a relatively small part of the larger labor economy. You can see that from some of the numbers which I've already discussed. But now that has changed quite completely. I think we have a much better idea on what the gig economy looks like, who's affected by it, what it's like. And in that way, what we have sort of advocated for, what we are pushing for, is the rights model, a rights model in the gig economy, which acknowledges that the gig worker is is a worker in every sense of the term and should be entitled to the same kind of rights that any worker is. And these include not just some say the right to social security, but also optional safety and health protections, right to form associations, and protection, right to receive fair wages, the right to receive, right against exploitation. All of those rights which any worker enjoys, the gig worker should be able to enjoy. The difference, I suppose, is that unlike with most workers, the gig worker does not have one single identifiable problem. There are multiple levels. That's enough the economy. What I think the big heavily done context of labor is that it was built on the assumption that work is work. It work fine in there. We shattered this in the data. It could not do it. Work we put in the room. Some people. It,
Alok, your voice is breaking up.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah. Hello. Sorry, your voice is breaking up. Do you want to come in once you reach your place?
Yeah, I'm exactly 1 minute away. So if you don't mind, I'll log out and I'll log back in exactly
All
1 minute.
All right. Okay. No
Okay.
problem.
I'm so sorry
Yeah,
about
sure,
this.
sure. No problem. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just glad you could make it. Thank you. So while Alok is going to log in again, maybe we can have Danya. Would you want to start your presentation? Then we can probably just have Alok to end his presentation. The rest, complete his rest of his presentation.
Anvesha, just a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
Just before that, may I please request everyone to switch on their cameras once again for us. Really sorry
Okay.
for the inconvenience. We would like to take another photo. Just 2
Okay.
minutes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much, everyone. Just give us 2 minutes.
But Alok is not there, no?
Yes, that's what I was wondering, whether it's
So
good to
again,
have
you will
him
still
and
need
then
to do one more with Alok.
can we do this towards the end then after Danya's presentation?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Anand's
All
Let's
right.
just
That
Yeah,
works.
because
Yes.
Please.
Yeah.
yes, thank you. So maybe let's start with Danya, and then once Alok gets in a more stable connection, we can ask him to come in again. Thank you.
Thank you, Anisha. And it's really an honor to join with all of you today. And as we explore this evolving landscape of this platform economy, especially in connecting with the gender. And I have a presentation. If someone can share it, that would be better. So my presentation, it is like bringing together key insights from my recent research work from 2022 onwards. The first one was on Vision 24/7, that was looking into how gig and platform work may grow over the next 2 decades. And the second one was on experiences of women in the gig economy, comparing it with the traditional employment and showing how they often face unique challenges, especially in terms of earnings and safety and flexibility, etc. And together these studies, and to make it more specific to women, the second one, which will be helping us to understand the changing nature of women's work in emerging gig economies and point to a kind of policies it's needed to make this growth more inclusive and sustainable. And in this background, and let me discuss these challenges and opportunities of women in the platform economy. Can you please share?
Yeah.
Yes, just a second. There is a technical glitch. We are just sharing it. We are trying. Just give us like half a minute.
Otherwise, Tanya, do you have your presentation? Do you want me to give you
मैं वो
sharing
वाला
right?
देखती हूँ ठीक है
Yeah, that would be also good. And if you can give the sharing drive, let me try.
Yeah.
Dhanya, you have the sharing right. You can share the PPT if you want.
But I don't have the sharing right now. Just check. I don't have the sharing right actually. Just
Can you once check, Dhanya?
yeah. Now I received. So Shipra, I think you are sharing, right?
Sorry, I've just logged in. So shall I wait for Miss Danya to finish and then
Yeah,
continue?
if you don't mind, Alok.
Yeah, no worries, no
Yeah,
I
worries.
think.
thanks.
Can you just go to the next slide?
Yeah, I'll do that. Yes, just give me a second. I'll just make it full slide. Yes. Is that okay, Dhanya?
Yes.
Great.
So we did a forecast in this Vision 2047 report, and it predicted that the number would grow to 61, it's almost 62 million by 2047. So it's pointing out that the gig economy would expand dramatically. Again, when we examine at this global freelance workforce of OLI data, India today leads the global freelance workforce with a remarkable 21% share. This is far ahead of countries like Russia and US. And this highlights how rapidly India's digital labor market is expanding. And but when we look more closely at who participate in this workforce, especially women, a different picture emerges. Like female participation in India's gig economy stands at just 27%. It's almost a half of the US rate, and it's almost like we can see that half of this US rate, that's 50.7%. And this gap, it is clearly indicating the untapped potential of women's work in the digital economy. And this gig platform, therefore, offer a powerful opportunity, not just to boost employment numbers, but to unlock women's workforce participation. But the nature of women work are concentrated in remains a concern. A large proportion of women gig workers are engaged in this low skill and low paying jobs. And these occupations often have a limited upward mobility and also expose women to greater vulnerabilities. Next, please. Yeah, as I said, one of our studies was specifically on women platform workers, and we did a field survey of 350 women platform workers in domestic beauty and food and grocery services. And let's examine the socio-economic conditions and economic profile of these platform workers. Yeah, from our field survey, we observed that this workforce is heavily dominated by young women, and nearly it's almost 70% of women gig workers fall within this age group of 25 to 35 years. And this is reflecting two important patterns. The firstly, the platform work attracts mid-age women, particularly those balancing these family responsibilities. The gig economy offers them flexible hours and ability to choose when and how much they work, an opportunity to earn closer to their home. So second, only about 7% are in the 18 to 25 age group. And we also find that the women above 35 are significantly underrepresented. It's indicating the barriers linked to digital literacy and a preference for more stable income jobs. So overall, this age distribution shows the gig work is particularly becoming a preferred livelihood route for married women in their mid years, and they are seeking both flexibility and financial independence. So when we look at this educational level, the trend is equally striking. A very large share of women gig workers are moderately educated, and around 40% have completed senior secondary schooling and 36% as graduates. And it's showing that the gig work is not a refuge for the unskilled, but is instead emerging as a preferred choice for educated women who are unable to join this traditional full-time employment due to domestic responsibilities. Next, please. Let me now go through this important demographic pattern emerging from our survey, the relationship between this age and marital status. And this is clearly showing that the platform work is dominated by women between 25 to 35, who together constitute this majority of workers. But what is particularly striking is that a very high share of women in this age are married, about 61%, 25 to 30 age, and nearly 94% in this 30 to 35 age. So this tells us that the platform work is increasingly becoming a space where married women, especially those in their late 20s and early 30s, are participating actively. So for many, gig work functions as a flexible secondary source of income, allowing them to balance this employment and domestic responsibilities. And on the other hand, the younger women, that 18 to 25 years, are mostly unmarried, and their participation is much lower. So another category and noteworthy aspect, it's like the category labeled others. That means the widow, divorced, or separated women. Though a small proportion, these workers tend to carry full economic responsibility and often turn to gig work for survival and independence. Next, please. When we look at this nature of work, and it helps us to understand how women are actually engaging with platform-based work, how long they stay and how intensively they work, and what their daily routine look like. And when we look at this duration of engagement in gig work, it's over 86% of women have been in the platform work between 1 to 5 years. This tells us two things. First, women are not treating platform work as a temporary arrangement. And secondly, the last 5 years have been a period of large-scale female entry into this platform economy. It's linking to digital penetration and rising urban migration, etc., and also search for these flexible income jobs. So another aspect is intensity of work. Despite this discourse around this flexibility, our evidence shows that the gig work is practically full-time work for most women. It's almost 41% women work 8 to 10 hours every day, and another 34% work 6 to 8 hours. So nearly 3/4 of women work full-time schedules. So this challenges the notion that gig work offers a short, casual, and part-time engagement. For women, gig work, in fact, it's structured like a full working day. And next slide, please. Here, in this soul earning pattern and marital status, and we can see an important aspect of women's participation and their role as a financial contributors within the household. This survey, it's showing, it's clearly, it's showing that the divide between women who identify themselves as sole earners and those whose earnings are supplementary. Only about 16% of women gig workers are sole earners in their families. A dominant 84% continue to be secondary earners. So this pattern is showing that even as women step into new forms of work, household financial responsibility still largely remains with male members. And platform work is therefore functioning more as a supplementary income source for most women. So let's look at what happens when we break this by marital status. So this picture is very interesting actually. Among the non-sole earners, the 76% are married and 24% are unmarried. So this reinforces that in most married households, women's earning remains secondary. So among these sole earners, 83% are married and 17% fall under the other in the sense divorced, widowed, and so 0% are unmarried. It means that suggests that the women step into the role of sole earners primarily when the responsibility is forced upon them. So, for example, due to spouse unemployment or maybe illness or in cases of separation or widowhood. So even migration. So it also shows that this marriage significantly shapes women's financial role, determining whether they are considered or positioned as primary or secondary earners. So these findings, it is mirror deep-rooted socio-cultural norms. And young unmarried women continue to depend on this financially on families. And married women tend to take up gig work as an additional income and not as a main one. And the women become sole earners, mostly in the absence of a male breadwinner. So this is what it is showing. So next slide, please. So on this slide, we see how women's participation in different gig sectors varies across age group. The pattern is quite revealing and speaks to the gender and life cycle realities shaping women's entry into the platform economy. First, the age group, 20-25, we already talked to 35 years, shows the highest overall participation. And this is the age when many women balance childhood and household responsibilities and the need for this flexible income. Within this age band, we see a strong concentration of women in the beauty wellness sector and is perceived as safer, familiar, and more socially acceptable for women. So next, please. It gives us a deeper understanding of how women participate across different segments of gig economy and how their educational levels shape these choices. Even women with graduate degrees tend to remain concentrated in beauty work. So this shows that the education does not automatically translate into access to formal jobs, and the women choose platform work because it offers flexibility. Next, please. Let me now look into this earning distribution. And what we observe is that the substantial proportion, around 57%, earn more than 20,000 per month. And it's showing that the platform work is emerging as an important contributor to household income. At the same time, 0.3% of women earn 35,000, indicating that gig work provides income opportunities. The scope for high upward mobility remains extremely limited. So this pattern tells us that gig work provides stability at the middle of the earning spectrum, but not necessarily growth at the top. And the second table, it's on the pattern of daily assignment handled by these women in different gig sectors. So beauty and wellness workers typically handle a moderate number of assignments and between 2 to 4 per day. But domestic workers, you can see it is 1 to 2 because each task involves several hours of work. And also in delivery and rider-based platform, it's a higher task, and depending on peak hours and algorithmic allocation, what it reflects is that the number of assignments is influenced not only by worker availability, but also by the nature of the services, the platform algorithmic allocation, and also the capacity, the physical capacity. So next, please. So it is showing that the mobility is not just a logistical issue, but a structural obstacle that directly affects women's earning, safety, and overall work experiences. A significant proportion of women, over 60%, report difficulty in locating customer addresses. And this is not merely a technical glitch, it reflects deeper challenges for example, GPS accuracy and internet connectivity, and also ambiguous customer interaction, etc. Next, please. This occupational health concerns, although this gig work is widely perceived as flexible, the data clearly shows that this flexibility comes at the cost of significant physical and mental health risks. Firstly, the very large proportion, and you can see here that it's almost 82% of women gig workers report suffering from both physical and mental issues. Next, please. Women often join gig work because of the promise of flexibility. However, from the study clearly shows that the flexibility acts as a double-edged sword. Like while women do use flexibility times as a coping strategy to balance work and domestic responsibilities, this flexibility is also structured within the platform constraints, especially the ratings, then peak hour demands, and also the customers' expectations. Hence, this flexibility exists, but it is conditional and fragile. When we look at this perception of freedom and flexibility, a large proportion of women perceive gig work as offering freedom. But our regression model, we did a regression model also, it was clarifying that the married women report higher perception of freedom, likely due to household support systems, and longer work duration reduces this perception of autonomy, and low convenience and poor earnings and algorithmic control. And these significantly reduce this perceived freedom. So freedom is therefore real, but we can say conditional. Next, please. When we look at this earning capacity of women engaged in this traditional forms of work, and
Tanya, can I request you to wrap up in the next 2 minutes, please?
Yeah, I'll just do it. And here it is, we have done a comparison with the traditional workers. And what we understood is that you can see that it's less than 20% monthly. And it's most of the workers are depending on that. So it is showing that that when you compare it with the gig work, it's a reverse pattern you can see in this slide. Please, next, please. Next.
I don't know why it seems to be frozen.
Yeah, just go to that. Yeah, barriers to participation. So there are many barriers which we found from the traditional to gig work, and especially this like limited digital literacy, then financial barriers, then safety and mobility concern, then family and cultural constraints. Next, please. These all are the evolving policies for gig and platform workers at the center, state, and aggregators level, and different policies. I'm not going details into that. Next, please. So in conclusion, while platforms initially provide autonomy and lower entry barriers, they fail to expand women's real choice due to persistent inequalities. The gap between this potential and reality demands urgent policy focus on decent work and social protection, etc. Next, please. To improve these conditions for these platform workers, especially women, policies must ensure the social protection through these gender responsive measures, such as this gender auditing, gender cell, and safety standards and gender sensitive infrastructure, while promoting the algorithmic transparency and fair rating systems and effective grievance redressal mechanisms, and also skill development and mentorship, then leadership inclusion and collective bargaining, etc. So thank you so much. Next. If you have any further clarification, please let me know. This is some of the references. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you so much. May I request everyone to please open your cameras, because some of the speakers may also be leaving. Saras, could you please quickly take a picture and we can have Alok and then we can move to the board.
Yes, sure.
In fact, Alok can speak, we can listen to Alok as we
Sure.
put on our cameras. And Dr.
All right.
Manjunath has said that
He
he
has
wanted to
to leave. Yeah.
leave. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anvisha, if it's okay, can I just continue?
Yes,
I
please
think.
Yeah,
continue.
please
It's
Yeah.
fine.
Thank
continue.
you, everyone.
Anish,
So sorry for the disruptions. So anyway, just to continue with the thought that I had left, which is that the gig work changes the fundamental trifecta which on which entire labor law is built, which is that there is one employer, there is who hires an employee to work at a workplace. And debates over classification do not fully understand that it doesn't matter how you classify workers if you don't take this reality into account. And I think this reality was what was not taken into account in the Code on Social Security, and which is why a new legislative framework was needed. And that new legislative framework is something that we at Vidhi proposed as a draft model law. And you can find our work on the Vidhi website. We have a consultation paper which also lists out why we think a new legislation is needed, what is necessary in that legislation, what has to be in the legislation, how it will protect the rights of workers. And we sort of took it to different states. I think the state of Rajasthan was the first to make an attempt in India to pass specific legislation to protect the rights of gig workers. Since then, we've had Karnataka, Jharkhand, Bihar, and now most recently Telangana pass legislation. I know at least three or four states are in conversation about this. So this is why there is a separate legislation, because the Code on Social Security does not adequately address the needs of gig workers and doesn't take into account the reality of how gig work functions. The second point that I sort of want to make is gig workers are precarious workers, and women gig workers are precarious gig workers. The point that I'm sort of trying to make here is that gig workers, with the nature of their work, are those who are bearing a lot of costs. And when I say costs, I mean the nature of the work requires the gig worker to take a lot of risk. This risk is everything from something as simple as having to pay for their own petrol and hope that the rates don't change, all the way up to risking their life and limb to meet that 10-minute delivery deadline that we set for them on the apps. So, because they take those risks, they are very much in the nature of falling off people. The other point where the risk emanates from is the fact that they have no employer to deal with. They have algorithms to deal with. This point was brought home to me at a conference in Rajasthan discussing the Rajasthan legislation when a labor organizer basically said, look, we used to have employers, now we have the phone. The phone is now the Malik, as he put it. And this is, again, something that is key and that has to be understood when we're talking about gig work. It is the algorithm and the nature of algorithmic work which makes gig work precarious. It's not about exactly how much money they earn. All of that is relevant to this. But all of that comes from this fundamental reality and fact that the employer now for the worker is the smartphone. Without the smartphone, gig work, as we understand it, could not have really existed. The smartphone and the ecosystem around it is what enables gig work. And in some ways, it also creates an opportunity for workers to mobilize for their rights and to agitate for their rights. And I think the way that we have seen gig workers across India come together to sort of demand better protections and to demand better legal protections in this context, I think is indicative of how gig workers have used technology also to advocate for their rights. But coming back to the point, I think Mr. Manjunath, Dr. Manjunath mentioned in his closing speech that the Karnataka gig worker law protects women workers also by providing them coverage under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. This is something which legally it's fairly easy to do, right? Legally, it can be assumed that in fact the workplace is not just the office that you go to. One of the things that you would have noticed with the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act is this perhaps one of the most radically progressive legislation in the context of the field of labor in India, because it does not tie protections to a specific defined workplace. If you are at work wherever you are, that is considered your workplace. And courts, to be fair, have understood the radical implications of this kind of detachment. We have seen judgments where courts have held that a hotel where you're staying while you're on work is also a workplace, right? The act also says someone else's house could be a workplace. By that token and logic, if you are a woman gig worker who is on the road while you are delivering something or while you are providing cab services, you are also at a workplace. So, in some sense, this legislation was actually ahead of its time in how it could help gig workers. The unfortunate part is not enough women gig workers know about this legislation. Not enough platforms take enough efforts to educate women workers to say, this is your right. If you face any harassment, please complain to us. Uh, Users of the platform we see have done that. But again, there has been a case which has come out in the Karnataka High Court where basically one of the platforms simply said, not our problem. And the Karnataka High Court has imposed, it said, and it's a very detailed judgment. I would recommend everyone to read it. It relates to the Ola platform where the court has protected a woman customer. But because it has done so, because it has interpreted the POSH Act and protection for gig workers in that broad way, it is something which also extends its protection to women gig workers as well. That said, we have seen that a real challenge for women gig workers, and I won't repeat the points, and I think Dhanya ma'am actually made those points very well. I will not go any further into it. We do find that for them, the real risk is earnings, the fact that employers tend to know that women are additionally vulnerable and are able to push them to accept lower pay for a lot of work that they do, are able to force them to purchase certain products that they would otherwise not. And this is specifically in the context of beauty and home cleaning, where a lot of women in these feminized professions are using the gig work to get work. So you will find that a lot of women gig workers are organizing, they're trying to push back, but they are yet to develop, I think, the strength or the networks to effectively demand that platforms change the way that they work. One final point that I sort of want to leave, and which is sort of developing on what Dr. Manjuna talked about in the context of the Karnataka legislation. The Karnataka legislation and all the other state legislations are a midpoint. As far as we are concerned, they are the starting point of a conversation to protect the rights of gig workers. They are an experiment in lawmaking. This is a state saying, we are now going to create this board, which is at the center of the legislation, you would have heard. We are now going to expect people who ultimately benefit from gig work to pay for the benefits that gig workers have to get and to protect their rights. And more importantly, we are going to get data which is going to give us the true picture of gig work. I think the third point I want to highlight on a little bit, the other two have already been spoken about. The third point is important because it's been 15 years approximately since platform based gig work has become popular in India, but we still do not have a good enough study which is actually telling us how many workers and where and in what fields they are. The data exists, it is not being shared. The data exists with each platform. Each platform for sure has a detailed list of all the gig workers, how much work they have done, in what capacity, in which city, for how long, but they have not been shared. And they have not been asked to share because no legal framework exists to make them share that data with the government. And these legislations are the starting point of that. Of course, data is necessary to deliver services to the workers, but this is an opportunity to build labor legislation in a data driven way where the government knows this is actually how many hours a gig worker is spending in the field, and this is how much money that they're making. Today, we don't have that figure. We don't know how many gig workers are suffering accidents. We don't know how many gig workers are suffering. I mean, we can estimate, we can do very well designed surveys, but that is a best guess. Here is an opportunity to do something like a census, but for gig workers. And this is where I think the legislation that is being proposed has a revolutionary potential to change the way in which labor laws are made. Because gigification, yes, there are a lot of problems for workers in the way that it sometimes strips them of their rights, sometimes makes their lives precarious, but it also offers an opportunity for the government to build social protections to protect their rights in a data driven, more precise and effective way. So I will end with this point to say that whatever legislations that you're going to see, which are going to be, which have already been passed and which will be passed, they are the midpoint in a conversation about the future of gig work. And the eventual hope, I suppose, is that the union government understands what is wrong with the code on social security, learns from these legislation, is able to look at the data that has been gathered by state governments on this, and gives the kind of social security, and not just social security, the kind of labor protection that gig workers truly deserve and merit in accordance with their rights as employers under all the existing legal framework. So thank you once again. I'm really sorry for all the disruptions that have taken place in joining late. So I just like to end on that note. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much, Alok. Thank you to all the speakers as well. And thank you for answering all the questions. I think all of this has been very relevant, and we hope to come up with a very good think piece. I would now hand over to Janvi and Daria, who's the director of ISST, for the vote of thanks, as we have clearly gone off time. So thank you so much. Yeah.
No, thank you, Anvesha. And I think the richness of what each of the speaker has brought to this webinar is really immense. Because I think we are at a time when a lot is happening, and yet we are only, at the beginning in many ways. To see what's going to be unleashed in terms of the role of what gig work is going to look like. That's really going to come in and all the data, all the reports that have been, shared so far indicates that there is a great momentum and there is a lot of implications that will take place as we move along this. And I think what was I would really like to thank each one of you. Dr. Manjunath has left, but for his always amazing willingness to come in and dialogue with different on such platforms to share how his thinking is, how he looks at it, and I think the way he brought out the connections between the codes, the law, and what they have been trying to do. I think that gives us a lot of hope in many ways that okay, this is where it can work, and he was also very candid about some things that are challenging. So I think that's great to know that there are such people, though they are a rare species we know these days, but I'm very happy that he was able to come and share. Also very happy. Thank you so much, Dr. Elena, for giving us that overview, a holistic way of looking at how ILO has been looking at it. I think the brown paper, the white paper, that kind of trajectory is very helpful for us to understand. Also want to thank Madhumita, because that again brings the confidence that yes, there is a data-driven, there is an evidence-driven approach, to how the platforms are looking at it, or how Ola is looking at it. I think that allows us to find points of conversation between the kind of evidence, for example, that Dhanya is bringing. And so how do we, say that different kinds of evidence that are coming together? And I think at the end, I want to also thank Alok for saying that, okay, what is the perspective we need to have? And, how do we, principles that we follow, how do we ensure that things, we are learning from what we are already knowing? And the kind of detailed study that Dhanya has given about, where are the women in all of this and what is it that we need to specifically focus on, I think provides a rich, what shall we say, all the ingredients are there. And I think there is a lot of promise in terms of our ability to respond with social justice to this millions of workers who are, have seeing this as a promise, are being held out as a promise even by government and by the private sector. So I think it's all upon us as to how do we, take this forward. And thank you so much for offering your insights, spending your late afternoon, evening with us, and to generate. And I think the young scholars who were here, great, a lot of hope that this, what we have discussed here will somehow help and shape the studies that you all have done. So thank you so much to all the participants who joined us. And with that, I think we can end today's webinar, and we hope to stay in touch for bilateral and even collective work that we can continue to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot. Thank you a lot for having me on this.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.